好，大家好哈，非常高兴这场大家来到这个 HTML5 的整个 session 的第一场。好，那这一场的讲者呢，我们邀请到了这个 Michael Smith 先生。好，那他目前在这个 W3C 工作哈，那他就是负责关于这个所有跟browsing 的一些 technology 相关的事务。那目前他就是个人是住在日本，所以他本来有打算要跟各位用日文做简报，不过我想在场可能大家还是听英文可能会比较习惯，所以我请他就是还是用英文做简报。那我好像忘了自我介绍哈，我叫 Eric， 我是 Eric 上官，好，那目前是台北 GTAG 的 organizer。好，那大家平常如果对 Google Technology 有兴趣的话，欢迎就是上網 search GTUG。好 ，OK， 那今天这个 Michael 呢，给我们介绍的这个主题是关于这个 HTML5 针对这个各位 programmers 所准备的一个议题。不管你过去有没有写过这个 JavaScript， 相信他今天的演讲内容一定会给各位很多启发。那现在让我们以热烈的掌声欢迎 Michael Smith。
ありがとうございます。皆さんこんにちは。おーすごい。じゃあ皆さん日本語わかるだからずっと日本語で今日。Hey, a couple things I want to get out of the way first before I start my presentation. Is Jean Lopez in the room? Or if Jean is looking for one of these 13-inch things like this. So if anybody has one that you can loan to him, Jean Lopez from WebKit and Qt, find him later and give him this or let him borrow yours. The other thing I wanted to do is say thanks very much to Bob Chow. I don't know if Bob's around either, but Bob is the one that arranged for me to be here with some help from my good friend Kenny Liu. Kenny works with me at the Keio University office of W3C in Japan. And Kenny set up the arrangement for me to come here. So thanks to both of them, and then thanks to Eric, wherever Eric went. I'm really glad to be here. It's the first time I've been in Taiwan. This is my second day in Taiwan, so I love it here. And I hope I can come back next year. There we go. And this is my daughter right here, by the way, in front. Her name is Satori. She's 12 years old. This is the first time she's been in Taiwan also. And she doesn't speak English so well, but if you speak Japanese, she speaks Japanese pera pera, so come talk to her. Okay, so just as far as information about myself, I'm in charge of the HTML activity at W3C. And that includes the HTML working group. It includes some other stuff, but mostly it's about the HTML working group. And mostly right now it's about HTML5. I work at Keio University, which is a private university in Japan. The campus that's outside of Tokyo, it's about an hour outside of Tokyo where I work. Kenny works there too. If you want to email me afterwards, my address is just mike@w3.org, very easy to remember. If you want to check out my homepage that I don't update very often at all, you can look at that page there. And if you want to follow me on Twitter or tweet about this, my name's Sideshow Barker on Twitter. So how many people here love JavaScript? If you love JavaScript, say yay! Woohoo! How many people hate JavaScript? Boo! Say boo! Boo! Well, I used to hate JavaScript. I hate JavaScript less now. And I didn't start loving JavaScript because it's the greatest language in the world. I started getting interested in JavaScript because it's the programming language for the web. When we talk about the web, some people think of web programming as the server-side application programming that happens. That's not really the web. You know, all that is a server-side application that responds to HTTP requests and sends information down to a browser, to a user agent. The real programming language of the web is JavaScript. And what's happened with HTML5 in the last, depending on how you count it, 7 years, 5 years, 3 years, is that JavaScript has gotten a lot of new features or a lot of new APIs. JavaScript itself has gotten some new features, but what we're doing in HTML5 is adding APIs, basically. We're adding some new markup in HTML5, but the biggest, most important part of what we're doing with HTML5 is we're adding programming APIs. And a lot of what we're doing in HTML5, although we like to say it's new and exciting and different, it's not that new, exciting, and different. One thing that we've done in HTML5 that everybody makes a big deal about is we're adding a video element. Well, you can already watch video in a web browser. You can use Flash, you can use other means to watch videos. So we're not creating a new way of viewing content on the web. You can already see videos. What we're doing, though, that's really important and different is that we're providing an open standard for publishing video on the web. This is one of the things that we're doing. And we're providing an API behind it that lets you programmatically manipulate the video. And we're doing all of this in a way that integrates well with the web platform. The other means that you have for creating video and scripting video on the web today rely on plugins. And the big difference with a plugin is if you have a plugin running in a browser, a video running in a plugin, you don't have any real programmatic access to controlling that video in the same way you do the rest of the DOM that you have in the browser. Does everybody know what the DOM is in browsers? Okay, a few people. Well, it's really quite simple. What you're dealing with when you're programming in the web is you're basically dealing with a document. Even if what you're doing is programming an application, it's modeled as a document in the browser, and the API that is used to model it is called the DOM. And so everything that you do is manipulating this DOM, which is a tree structure, and that's most of what JavaScript's about. It's really quite boring, actually. If you go in and start using the DOM API, it's not a terrifically exciting API. But what I want to do today is show you some things that are interesting and new that maybe can help to get you excited about programming using JavaScript and programming to make web applications in browsers. The thing I want to do today, I have only 30 minutes, I think, today, right? Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot of time. So what I want to do is point you to somewhere where you can go to look for information later. If I can get my screen working again, come on. Come on. There we go, beautiful. So this site is called HTML5 Rocks. And you can't see it, but that's one word, HTML5Rocks.com. And this is actually created by some people at Google. Any Google folks here from Google Taiwan? Don't see any familiar faces, but some guys from Google put this together, and they're the ones that are maintaining it. There's some different parts of this. One part that I don't have time to show a lot with today is a section that's called Code Playground. And if you go in here and look at this, if your DNS is working and your browser's not saying resolving hosts down there at the bottom. Let me try a different, let's try. Which one? Free? It's that computer right there? Okay. We'll wait while that beach ball turns. This web page is not available, no surprise there. What this site does is it demonstrates some HTML5 features that you can use now. Which one you said again? 3? That'll work better. Let's depend on that if we can do that. All right. Is that working, brother? Mm-hmm. Let's try another wireless thing here. I don't know if that thing's going to work. Oh, wait, that's yours. Bob Way's iPhone 6? No? Let's try 3. So I told you I didn't tell you there's going to be some comedy today. This is the comedy part of the presentation, so you get a laugh at my expense for not being properly prepared. There we go. Holy Christ, this happens every time. Help me out here, guys.
想要让这个系统继续的
All right, hang on.
下去。那我接着跟大家介绍一下，在今年年初之后到现在，那 Sahana 台湾有一些新的发展。那最特别的就是有一个 Python 版本的系统的改写计划正在进行。OK， 那这一个版本 Python 的版本，它是应用了 MVC 的架构，然后在使用者界面上面去改进。那这个Sahana 最早是 PHP 开发的，大概在4年前，那这个版本已经出现，而且在使用，目前还在特别是南亚地区广泛的被使用。可是有另外一个新的版本是最近1-2年以 Python 程式语言所开发的版本，那都是在 Sahana Software Foundation 底下在经营。那 PHP 的版本现在的专案名称称为 Augusty，Python 的版本叫 Eden。那除了功能大致上面一样以外，目的也一样，他们的授权有点不一样不过都是 open source 的软体。那可是为什么在一个基金会底下，然后同一套用途的系统想要写2套呢 ？OK， 那主要原因是在于 PHP 原本这个版本呢，就是比较早期就开发，所以在设计的架构上面比较没有考虑到一些跟外界系统做整合的一个需求所以特别是像现在的救灾防灾的这些资讯，需要用到大量的GIS 的资讯，或者是也要接一些简讯系统。那这个在旧版的 PHP 上面比较难以满足。那开发人员也觉得需要有一个 framework 去依着这个架构上面去做开发，然后 focus 在使用者实际应用的需要上面不要整个系统的 stake 都自己维护。那对于 Python 的开发人员而言呢，他们希望引进这样的一个新的开发方式，然后让有一些
That was my clever teaching moment to teach you, be properly prepared every time you do a presentation. Don't be like me. Don't be like the bad guy who comes up and doesn't prepare properly for his presentation, okay? That's your lesson for today. Okay, Code Playground. I really don't have time to show this thing now because I got like 15 minutes. But what's really cool about this is like a live demo site. You can't see well. Let me crank up the font here real quick just to show you what some of this stuff is. So what we have is some different APIs here. These are all JavaScript APIs. This web storage one is a way that you can avoid, well, not avoid, but it's an alternative to using cookies. You can store client side, you can store user data per session and persistently on the client side using this mechanism. There's a couple different APIs that are associated with that. This Web SQL database mechanism, by the way, it's not part of HTML5, and it's not part of the web platform. The reason for that is that Mozilla is not going to implement it. It's not going to be implemented in Firefox. It's also not going to be implemented in Microsoft Internet Explorer. What's going to be implemented instead is something that's called IndexedDB. IndexedDB is a real indexed database that's stored on the client side. It just does not have a query language. It doesn't have a standard query language associated with it. But it's still, if you know about databases, it's a IndexedDB that you can use that's more sophisticated than just doing name-value pairs. This first one is just name-value pairs. Post message, drag and drop. There's some other simple things here. Geolocation API is a lot of fun to mess around with. And what you can do is, if you click on these and you start going through them, you can make code changes over here, and they get reflected live in the application. So it's a way where you can go in and hack and see your changes in real time. So it's a lot of fun. It's, if you're a programmer, to mess around with. That's why it's called Playground. It's nothing, you're not doing anything real serious, but it's a good way to get familiar with the APIs and see what effects different changes have. But let me go ahead and show some demos of some of these so that you can see what they really do. So one of the first things you'll notice about this is when I change slides on this slide presentation, this connection is pretty slow, but it's working. Going back to DNS, resolving host, connecting. This is great. It's like the old days. This is like 28.8 modems, the 300 baud even, where you could watch everything happen in real time. A lot of fun. Natsukashi is what we'd say in Japanese about that. Okay, let me show you something. You can't really see it, and I can't make the address bar bigger, but if you look at the top of the address bar here, I get my little laser thing so I can point you where I'm talking about. If you look at the top of the address bar, what you'll see here is there's a fragment ID on the end of this URL. So what you have is a URL, which is for a site, and then you have a single page, and what you have is the hash sign, the sharp, and then a slide number. And what this means is, if you look at this entire presentation is one single web page. It's divided up into logical pages, but it's physically one single document. And what you'll see happens is if I go forward in this slide, you'll see that the hash just changed. So it's now number 2. That says slide 2. And what's really cool about this is if I hit the back button on my browser, instead of going back to whatever previous URL I was at, which is probably like a porn site or something, I don't know, I don't want to go back to that one. But so that's the danger of doing presentations too. You hit the back button, you go back to something you don't want people to see. So don't do that either. That's the other lesson for today. If I hit the back button, it takes me back to, well, it should. God damn it. I'm cursed. I've done something wrong here, and God is punishing me. So, well, what you should see happen when you push the back button is it takes you back to the previous fragment ID instead of taking you back to the previous URL. And that's part of HTML5, which is something that's called, there's a hash change event, and there's a handler for that that's called onHashChange. And when the hash changes, then you can associate some action with it. And what's really cool about this is you can write an AJAX application, an XHR application that uses AJAX communication asynchronously with the web server, and like your email application, like you can do with Gmail. And when the state of that application changes, you can associate that. You can basically tag that or peg it, whatever you want to call it, and you can go back to that state. So when you're pushing the back button, you're not going back to a previous URL. You're going back to a previous state of the application. And that's a really, really powerful thing. It's not so cool when you see it demoed, but as a programmer, that's what you really want. You want, when users push the back button, you don't want them to go back to the previous URL. You want them to stay in your application and go back to the previous state. So that's what happens with this. All right, let me get to some of the coolest part of this. So I'm going to just tear through most of this, and I'll come back. There's about 50 slides in this thing. And I really, really highly recommend that if you're interested in the programmatic part of HTML5, that you go and look at this, mess around with it, check out some of the videos, check out some of the demos, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But first thing I really want to show is an example of programming in CSS. Now, most people don't think of CSS as a programming language, but it is. It is a programming language. It just uses a declarative syntax. Instead of using an imperative syntax like JavaScript does, JavaScript's an imperative language, CSS is a declarative language. So you declare things and they happen. And what we can see here first is the normal way that you do something with CSS and JavaScript is if you have this red box here on the right side of the page and you want to move it to the left side of the page and you want to move it to the right side of the page, this is not a terrifically exciting programming challenge, but the way that you would do this today in most browsers, this is the effect you would get. Oh, shit. Oh, there we go. See, I don't know the difference between left and right, and I've just demonstrated that also. So I was pushing the left button. It was already at the left. So this is called pilot error. This is the cause of airplane crashes. The pilot keeps pressing, he thinks he's going right, but he keeps pressing left, Anyway, so you go left, you go right. You notice that there's no transition behavior there. This sucks, actually, as a user interface programming feature. You don't want things going like jerking back and forth like this. What you want is a smooth transition. And there are ways to do this with JavaScript. You set timers, you do other things, you have something move across the page in a smooth way. Well, you can now do this in CSS. And let me expand the CSS just to show you what it looks like, because it's really dead simple. If I can move around here, that's a little too much maybe. The important part to demonstrate here is just this part. If I can get my Mac OS stuff out of the way. It's just this part here. WebKit transition. Margin left. This doesn't say LS. It says 1 second. And it says ease in, out. That's the whole programming that's going on here. There's a little bit of JavaScript that just binds the transition to an event, and the event is me pushing one of these buttons. But the actual work is being done using CSS. And so let me put this back down and show you what happens. If I say left, nothing's going to happen again. But if I say right, you see there's a smooth transition there. And this is not being done through any form of JavaScript. This is all being handled by the CSS engine in the browser and through this transition command. So this is simple programming. This is probably just about the simplest kind of programming you can do in a browser as far as programming using CSS. And so CSS has gotten some new features for animations, for transitions, for transformations. And this is some of the coolest stuff because it's some of the easiest stuff to program. So even if you're more of a designer than a web developer, you're more of a HTML author than you are a JavaScript programmer, this is something that you can get started with. And this works today in Chrome. I'm demoing this in Chrome, and it works in WebKit. I'm not sure the versions because I run all the development versions of browsers. So I run WebKit nightlies, I run Chrome dev channel releases, I run Minefield. So I don't know when this stuff actually makes it into actual releases, but it'll be there soon if it's not in there already. So let me go back and show you some other things from the beginning of the presentation. Maybe my back button will work now. There we go. No, I'm hitting the back button and it's going up. So I am just out of favor with the gods today. So let me go back to the beginning and I'll start the slides from the beginning. I have about 7 minutes here, so I'll go over some of the really, really important stuff for you to know about. I mentioned in the beginning, very little of what we're doing in HTML5 is really all that new. What we're doing is importing, in large part, what we're doing is importing some features that are part of other programming languages, other application frameworks, other application platforms, and making them part of the web platform in a way that integrates with the programming model for the web. One of the coolest and most important ways that we're doing this is through this mechanism that's called web workers. And this came originally from Google Gears, which is gone now, but web workers now has a new life as part of the web platform. And what workers is, some people compare it to threads, but it's a way of taking a computationally expensive 10 minutes I have. I somehow got an extra bit of time there. So God is smiling upon me a little bit, at least today. What web workers is, it's kind of like threads, like I said, but what you can do is, it's not threads because JavaScript doesn't have threads. And basically, I don't know how many people are threads programmers here, but you only want to program threads if you're like a masochist and you really want to cause yourself a lot of frustration. But we're not going to have threads in JavaScript. What we have instead is this mechanism that lets you take a process and background it so that when you run that process, it doesn't block the UI. The most important thing in programming, one of the most important things at least, if not the most important, is that you do not want to have the UI blocked. You don't want to have the user taking some action, pressing a button, doing something, and seeing nothing happen, or seeing the UI lock up. It prevents them from doing something else. For example, you don't want a user, if they're uploading attachments to their web-based email client, you don't want those uploading of attachments to block their composition if they're composing a message. You want them to be able to compose a message and have all that stuff go on at the same time. that you don't really need workers for. But there's some other things where, especially when you get into graphics programming and some other things that are very computationally expensive, you want to background that process, and you want to have the main user interface react once that process is done. This is basically what workers is for. And it's using essentially message passing. So if you're used to programming in other languages where you're using a lot of message passing, that's really what this is. It's a message passing mechanism that lets you program using concurrent processes. It's not really concurrency like on the level of Erlang or something like that, but it's like that. That's the mental model to map it to. So it's really extremely important. And this is a really cool demo, because what this demo shows you, it does this computationally expensive multiple node mapping thing. And if you try to move the map around while it's doing that, you'll find that your movement of the map is blocked. So the UI has been blocked by that process of doing the computation. If you have that background process of doing the mapping, the node connections in the background, then you can still move the map around and everything works fine. And then when that process ends, you'll see that the map gets updated. So this is a really cool demo to look at and to look at the code for, because it'll teach you, show you how you can program applications in this way that don't block the UI. Another thing that we have is almost every other programming language that's a serious programming language has a method for creating sockets and for doing network communication using raw sockets. Doing socket communications with arbitrary TCP/IP applications. Well, JavaScript doesn't have this. JavaScript does not natively have a socket interface. And this feature of HTML5, which is called WebSockets, is not actually a real TCP socket. But it's about as close, it is as close as you're ever going to get in JavaScript to having a raw TCP socket. And what this allows you to do is, you can take a JavaScript application, a web application, and you can have it do real, full duplex, bidirectional communication over a socket with a server. And you can have multiple clients doing that, and then what you have is you can create something like a chat application, where you have real-time XMPP communication going from one web application to another in real time, well, near real time. It's really important for applications like chat. What we do today is we have hacks that, the term that's used, the general term that's used for these hacks is Comet, but Comet is a hack. It's not a standard. It's never been standardized. It's some hacky ways to fake full duplex bidirectional communication. WebSockets is a real full duplex bidirectional communication mechanism. And the main use case for this is things like chat applications, but there are other applications too. Things like games, MUDs. Ian Hickson, who's the editor of the HTML5 spec, has actually written a MUD using WebSockets. Do people still know what MUD is? Gamers? MUD? Multi-user dimension. It's kind of like text-based gaming. Yeah, old school. Cool. Here's another thing that's cool, and I may actually be able to demo this, and it may work. We'll see. Okay, so I just said set notification permissions for this page, and it's asking me, I want to allow HTML5 Rocks to show notifications, and I want to say allow, and I need to put my Twitter ID. I could actually put anybody's Twitter ID in here, but I'll put my own, and I'll say show tweet notifications, and we'll see if this actually works. It's probably not going to, as my luck is. Oh, holy Christ, there we go. Now, the important thing about this is that is not a notification that was generated by the web browser. That is a notification generated by the operating system. So that's at the operating system level. And what has been done to implement this is that the web browser itself, not the web application running the browser, the web browser has to have an API. Well, it has to have exposed to it an API that allows it to call whatever notification mechanism is part of the operating system and platform. And what the web application then can do is what we're doing in HTML5, well, this is not part of HTML5 actually, but it's a new piece of work that we're doing at W3C. What it allows the web application to do is request that the browser request that the operating system send a notification. And this is really simple. I mean, in action, I don't know what you would really need this for as far as Twitter goes. But what you really do need this for in the real world is, say, for example, you are using some auction site. What auction site do you use in Taiwan, by the way? Is there like Yahoo Auctions or eBay? Yeah, so one of the key use cases for this is, you know, when you're bidding on something at eBay or Yahoo Auctions or whatever you use, you want to know as soon as somebody's outbid you or as soon as some actions happen. You want to be notified right away so that you can put up another bid or do something. There's a lot of cases like that where you have a web application that's doing something, and then you want to get a notification as soon as some change of state happens in that application. Well, that's what you can do with this. You can put your browser into the background. You don't have to sit there and look at your browser page, you know, 24 hours a day. What you can do is have the browser be in the background, have that web application run in the background, and it's using Ajax or XHR to do its asynchronous communication to get updates, or it's using WebSockets or something. But what happens when some important event happens in that page, then you get this notification from the operating system, regardless of what other application you're in. So you could be in Microsoft Outlook, you know, you could be in your Unix shell, your terminal window, your console, and you get this notification. So that's what's really important about this. This is a new piece of work that we're working on. And I have about time to show maybe one more thing here. Geolocation is really cool. I recommend exploring that. It's a pretty simple API. But one of the very most important things that I want to make a point of showing here, we have an element that's new in HTML5 that's called Canvas. And as part of the HTML5 spec itself, we have a two-dimensional drawing API for Canvas, which is cool. It lets you do a lot of cool stuff in 2 dimensions. But another thing that we have is a Canvas 3D API, which is called WebGL. And this does not work in Chrome yet for some reason, but I think it does work in WebKit, so let me see if it'll actually work. And if it doesn't work in WebKit, I may have like 1 minute left I have, so let's see. This will be a sign from the gods, if this actually works, that I am back in favor with the masters of the universe. You could hear a pin drop. 2. Wow, I don't know what's going on there. That's SVG. Canvas example. It's just loading slowly. All right, I'll talk over this while we're there. But this is a real 3D API that you can use to create 3D games like Doom or Quake. In fact, I think some of the Google guys in collaboration with somebody else actually ported Quake using WebSockets and this WebGL API to the browser, and it works. And it's probably not going to work on the screen today, but I very much recommend this. If you're a game programmer or you're interested in getting into game programming, what WebGL is going to allow you to do is create really sophisticated 3D environments, virtual environments, like World of Warcraft or whatever the rest of the stuff is that the kids do today. But you can do it in the browser, and you can distribute it over the web. You don't have to distribute it. You don't have to have users download it and install it or anything like that. All of the client software is already there in their browser, and that's what we're all about. We want everybody to have access to all these features. We want you as a programmer to be able to deploy your applications to the widest possible number of users. And the way to do that is to use JavaScript, use HTML5, and these related APIs to write your programs and distribute over the web. And I think I'm out of time, so thank you everybody for your patience, and I appreciate it.
时间不多了，那想问在场有没有人有问题？我们一个问题就好，好不好？有没有人有问题？好，如果大家都这么害羞的话，那我们就再一次以热烈的掌声，谢谢 Michael。好，那我们接下来还有一场就是今天早上的 HTML5 的 session， 还有第2场的讲题，所以大家。
One more thing, we're having the HTML5 BOF. I can't remember what time that is.
Okay.
But yeah, so if people have more questions and stuff, sometime this afternoon, I can't remember when, but somebody remembers, we're having an HTML5 birds of a feather thing, BOF, around here somewhere, and I'll be there, and I'm happy to answer questions there. So, thanks.
好，就是今天晚上的 BOF 的这个参会哈，有这个 HTML BOF 好，所以如果大家对于这个Michael 还有一些问题的话，晚上都是非常欢迎大家参加这个 HTML5的 BOF。好，所以那请大家。